Every Christmas Eve, our family watches the 1983 movie The Best Christmas Pageant Ever, from the book written by Barbara Robinson. And in that movie, there's a kid who's just appalled at the fact that Herod is not in the Christmas pageant. With unbelief, he says he's out to kill the baby and he's not even in the play? He's got a point, you know. Have you ever noticed how in Matthew's gospel, when King Herod hears about the imminent arrival of the King of the Jews from the wise men, the text says that Herod was frightened. And then it says, and all Jerusalem with him. Now the word here in the Greek means like agitated, unsettled, anxious, distressed. But why were they distressed? Why was Herod distressed? Why was an entire city distressed? I mean, weren't they waiting for the coming of God's promised king? They were distressed because Christmas is not safe. Christmas is not safe for Herod. Christmas is not safe for those in powerful positions, and Christmas is not even safe for the powerless. So I've talked before about how I love the movie The Nativity Story. We usually watch that every year as well. But one of my favorite things about the Nativity Story is its depiction of Herod. Because Herod was a very violent and powerful and paranoid king, and the movie really depicts that paranoia well. We know from history he had his wife and a couple sons and a brother-in-law and other family members killed because he thought they were a threat to his rule. He was the appointed by the emperor king of the Jews, but his way of getting that position was underhanded and conspiratorial, and he had to work hard to hold on to that. So of course he was threatened at the idea that there is a king of the Jews coming, that these Magi had come from a long way off to come and visit because they knew he was coming. Herod had a reason to be afraid. Christmas for Herod was not safe. But what about all Jerusalem? What about the city? What about those in power? We know in Scripture and from history that some of the religious leaders and others were in a cozy, comfortable relationship with the government and with the king. They didn't really want things to change despite their theology and their scriptures. They wanted the status quo because in the status quo, they had power and position and privilege, and they didn't want to give that up. But the idea of a new king coming to unseat the current reigning king, that would have been a threat to anybody in comfortable, powerful, cozy positions. Christmas is not safe for the powerful. And then what about the powerless? What about the poor and the powerless? Those who, aren't they waiting? They're waiting for the promised king. They're waiting for redemption. They're waiting for Emmanuel to come and ransom captive Israel, right? That's what they're waiting for. And yes, they are. They are waiting for that. But that's still a scary thing because they've seen what happens to rebellions against the throne. They've seen the violence of King Herod. They know that their king is the kind of king who will not hesitate to kill all of the children in one city just to stop a threat. That is frightening. Christmas is not safe for the poor and the powerless. So they were distressed. All Jerusalem was distressed. But do you know who's not distressed in this story? The only ones in the story who aren't distressed are the wise men. Oh, they knew it wasn't safe, I'm sure. They would have been able to sense the fear across the land as they traveled, and maybe they heard songs. Maybe they ran into poets and musicians along the way who shared the songs of the prophets, or songs like Zechariah's and Mary's. Songs about kings who are dethroned, and powerful who are humbled, and rich who are left wanting when this king comes and everything changes. They would have known it wasn't safe. But they traveled hundreds of miles and they brought gifts for a reason, because they knew something. And Matthew says, he says that Herod was distressed, the city was distressed. What does he say about the wise men? He says they were overjoyed. Not because they thought it was safe, but maybe because they knew the prophet, they knew Isaiah, they knew the promise, they knew that this was supposed to be the Prince of Peace, the mighty God, the everlasting Father, the one whose reign of shalom would never end. They knew that the arrival of a divine king was worth celebrating. And so they were filled with joy. You remember the story of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, C.S. Lewis's book. And in his book, he tells the story of Aslan, who is the lion and the redemptive figure of the book. And at one point in the story, the children ask Mr. and Mrs. Beaver if Aslan is safe. And Mr. Beaver says, of course he isn't safe. Of course he isn't safe. But he's good. He's the king, I tell you. Dear friends, I wish you an Advent season filled not with fear, not distress or agitation, but with anticipation. Anticipation of peace and hope and joy, because the King is on the move. I will probably take a week off of Afterwords for Christmas, but we'll see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.